Welcome to the It's All About Missions podcast with Brady Van Winkle, as we endeavor to talk about missions and the need for the gospel all around the world. We hope we can help you find your place in world evangelism. And for questions or for more information, please check out it'sallaboutmissions.com. And now we hope you enjoy the show. Hello, and thank you for joining us on this week's episode of It's All About Missions Country Spotlight, Country of the Week. And this week we're going back to Africa, and we're going to be looking at the African country of Chad. A lot of people may know Chad just because it's an easy name, it's an easy African name, but they may not know much about the country of Chad. And I know myself, I've learned a little bit before I did this podcast so that I could talk a little bit about it, but Chad is an African country. It's very close. It's like right in the middle of northern, and also it's just south of like Egypt and places like that. And there's just a great need there for the gospel to be preached. And the population of Chad, there's about 16 million people in the country of Chad. The two official languages there are Arabic and French. Again, those are the official languages. But as I was reading, there's over 100 different dialects spoken, again, like most of these African countries. And lots of different tribes years and years ago. And as things became closer to go together, people conquered and things like that, more people moved in, they developed French, English, Arabic, different languages like that so they could trade. And so Arabic is the main language, also French is there, but also you can go out to different places and find tribal languages that are still spoken. But there's a great need of the gospel there. The capital city, I'm going to do my best to pronounce this. This is definitely an African name. N'Djamena is the capital city. It has about 1 million or so, probably 2 million, 3 million people living in and around it. There's a great need for the gospel there. I didn't know at one time, I heard of people working in the country of Chad. I don't know, I haven't recently heard of anyone going there, but there's a great need for the gospel because many people they don't know anything about Chad. They don't know where it is. They don't know what it is, but like I said, it's right below Libya. It's also right below, or not far from Egypt, and next to some of the other African countries. I'm looking at it, and I can't remember the names of these countries, and I do apologize for that. I believe it's not too far from Burkina Faso and places along those lines. It's considered, I would assume it's considered northeast, west Africa, because it's like right in the middle there. But there's a great need for the gospel in the country of Chad, and we'll be praying for them. And I know a man who worked there many years ago. God worked in a great way as he was working in different parts of Africa. I know at some point he was in Chad. But let's just pray for the country of Chad. Let's pray that God raises up believers there. I was going to tell you about the religious stats there. Over 50% of the country, about 52 to 55% claim to be Muslim. And then there's about 40% that would be altogether named as Christian. Again, a lot of those, they have different tribes, different languages, different things like that, but also a lot of the Islam and even in the Christian, they throw in their tribal ancestral worships and things like that into that. And so there's a great need for the gospel. What breaks my heart, though, is I was reading, and what my heart is there are people who've gone here. There are Christian missionaries that have been allowed here, and Jehovah's Witnesses, false cults, false religions have gone in there and taken the gospel. And yes, many Christians have gone there and taken the gospel, but I read that now there are Muslim missionaries there, and that's why that's what's happening in a lot of Africa. They're sending people from these Islamic countries. They're going in there, and these countries like from Saudi Arabia, from Turkey, from all these other places, they're trying to work in these African countries. They're giving them resources, they're giving them things, they're building things up for them, and these people are happy and they're excited because they're getting money, they're getting help, they're getting food, and then they turn to their religion because they're sharing that with them. But what would it say if we as Christians to go there? Not to build them schools, not to build them homes, not just to give them food, but to go and to take them the word of life and to take the gospel to the people who are dying, going to hell in the country of Chad. I ask you just to pray this week for the country of Chad. Let's pray that God will raise up laborers. Let's pray for the missionaries that are already laboring, that God will give them fruit for the labor. Let's pray for the Chad pastors, that God will give them boldness as they lead their church. Let's pray for the Chadinese Christians, that God will give them boldness to preach the gospel to their friends and neighbors. But let's pray for those who are lost in Chad about the gospel, that God will work in their hearts. But, in order for them to hear, we need an army. Let's pray that God will raise up an army of laborers to give their life to go to the country of Chad and take the gospel there. And let's pray this week that during this week that we can see over the next few months, over the next few years, in this generation, that we can see Chad reach the gospel in this generation. And as I always say each and every podcast, hey, just because you're praying for it, you shouldn't just be praying for it. You should be doing all that you can yourself. What are you doing to help see the world reach the gospel in this generation? If you're a Christian, you should be at least going to church every time the doors are open. You should be sharing the gospel with friends, family members, coworkers, anyone you come in contact with that you can. Share the gospel with them. You should be discipling people. You should be giving towards your church, but also towards missions. And you should be considering taking a mission trip at least once in your life, but I want to challenge you one other thing. When you consider what part you would have in helping getting the gospel all around the world, because people are dying going to hell all around the world, people are dying going to hell, and I ask you to pray about what part you'd have in seeing the world reach the gospel in this generation. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of It's All About Missions. And we'd like to ask you to do a couple things for us. The first thing I ask you to do, so if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date when all of our new episodes drop. And that way, as a new episode comes, you'll get a notification that lets you know, hey, we've got a new episode of It's All About Missions. Second thing I ask you to do, if you haven't yet, please make sure to leave us a review. These reviews are very vital, and they help us out, and they help other people to see us in the podcast player of choice. They'll see us and see those reviews and say, hey, I want to check out this podcast. And lastly, one other thing I'd like you to do, why don't you share us with a friend, a family member, somebody you know, and say, hey, why don't you go over and check out It's All About Missions. That'll help us grow our audience, help people to know more about It's All About Missions, and guess what? It'll help more people get involved in reaching the world with the gospel. I want to challenge you to know that the Bible, it's all about missions. And as a Christian, your life should be all about missions. And what are you going to do to impact the world with the gospel in this generation?